Hello and welcome to this episode of the Whole Health with Rob Carney podcast. This is a platform to connect with and share the stories of health professionals, personal development leaders, and health entrepreneurs who are making an impact in the world. And today I'm joined by Kris Guajala. So Kris is one of the co-founding members of American Aries Incorporated, the world's first publicly traded EMF protection technology company in the world, creating and innovating new EMF product protection technology products and bringing them to the market. His role is in operations, sales, and marketing, and has helped grow the company since 2015. So, if you're not familiar with Aries Tech, I've been using their products for just about 3 years now. And I can say I've seen some great benefits myself. In this episode, we're going to dive into what EMFs are, because that's always a great place to start, how we can protect ourselves from this technology, and recognizing that the rate of technology is going to keep going. So we want to learn to live in harmony. So Kris offers some different solutions that we can utilize. He offers his DLS method, talks about the $20 million plus that has been invested into research to give us the best products out there. So I hope you enjoy this episode. Sit back, relax, enjoy the show, and wait till the end because we got a nice little offer for you. So Kris, welcome to the show, my friend. I'm happy to have you here today talking about all things EMF. So first of all, welcome. And would love to just start off, hammer right to the point. What are EMFs and why are they important?
So thanks for having me, Rob. Of course, it's always great catching up with you. But I'm only here not really to talk anything else but EMFs. But what really EMFs are, and I think what the general public or the general audience needs to understand is that what electromagnetic fields are, and that's the acronym EMFs. They're categorized in two different, I would say, categories. One, there's the natural EMFs, which are natural occurrences in nature, such as the resonance from the Earth's magnetic field itself, for example. Exposure from the sun, for example. These are all natural EMFs and occurrences that happen in nature by design. And this is completely different from what I'm about to address right now, which is what we call artificial or man-made electromagnetic fields that have been known to cause and have been directly related to and linked to a lot of health-related issues. Cancer and tumors, worst case scenario, but obviously a lot of health issues, day-to-day health issues. But the real difference here is that most of the man-made artificial electromagnetic fields are commonly sourced from a lot of the data transmitting devices that we commonly use, such as smartphones, cell phones. In the earlier days when there was no smartphone, it was a cell phone, and pretty much anything wireless. Doesn't mean that it's necessarily strictly just wireless technologies. It actually, there's a term called LFs, which is low frequencies that you can typically find in your home that typically come from appliance devices such as your microwave or your television or your fridge, and even smart meters. So there is a subcategory to that as well. However, again, what this really is, it's energy transmission, specifically radio communication from data transmitting devices that emit this frequency that we now know as electromagnetic fields or associated with electromagnetic fields that is completely artificial and man-made. In other words, it's not the natural frequencies that I was telling you about, the natural occurrences that we have in nature that our bodies are obviously used to. And in fact, we actually resonate with. This is the main difference.
Love it, man. Yeah, thanks for outlining that. And something that I think I always like to kind of let people or remind people of is nature has adapted over tens of thousands, if not millions of years, or even billions of years, depending on how far back you think the world goes, to different frequencies. And you think of bats using sonar, they're not using their eyesight, they're picking up frequencies as they go. Pollinators are a big thing with frequencies. And, I've seen a lot of studies out there that say the two biggest threats to pollinators are pesticides and electromagnetic frequencies. And we're talking about these non-native man-made electromagnetic frequencies, electromagnetic fields, electromagnetic radiation. There's a lot of different, terminology we can use, EMF, EMR. But generally speaking, we're talking about the non-native ones when we're speaking of that here. So And with
Correct.
that being said, people, we hear in kind of like the hippie world is like, oh, they got good vibes. And what does vibes mean? Vibes is just vibration, and we are vibrational beings. And so when we're emitting or being exposed to, the emissions of non-native frequencies, that is legitimately changing our chemistry at a cellular level. So I'd love to kind of just dive into, some of the health concerns, because obviously we're being bombarded by these things. We've now found ourselves in a digital grid that we're living in for the most part, or we're on our
Yeah.
way there. So what are some of the downsides of being exposed to these?
Well, I mean, you don't have to take my word for it, because there's tons of data out there that comes from very reputable sources, and both in the scientific and medical communities alike, all over the world. In fact, I suggest for a lot of people, if you're unfamiliar with some of these resources, one of the bigger ones is the Bioinitiative Report, and that is basically a group who have come together in both medical and scientific community to publicly, I would say, acknowledge and take a stand on how toxic and real the exposure and the health risks associated with EMF exposure is. There are so many, I would say, issues that I can tackle and really pick from, but some of the ones that are top of mind that are really near and dear to me, that I've seen both in a negative and also in a positive way. And by positive, I mean I've seen I've seen some success stories come from this, but there's a lot of issues. And obviously cancer and tumors are sort of worst case scenarios, but it really starts from I would say 2011 with the World Health Organization, when they classified electromagnetic fields as a possible carcinogen, which is a class 2B carcinogen. This was back in 2011 May. Okay, from the International Agency on Research for Cancer. Again, this is a World Health Organization agency, and they're the ones who classified, electromagnetic fields or radio transmission, microwave radiation, as a class 2B carcinogen. So really, the I would say the catalyst for everything that we've sort of been building up to up until this time has started really from that declaration. And that particular declaration back in 2011 in May specifically linked as a class 2B carcinogen to basically cancer and tumors, right? Or tumor development. Most specifically glioma, which is a type of brain cancer that can be found usually in the temporal lobe, which is usually located around coincidentally, the area that you most commonly would hold your cell phone or your smartphone today. So that was in 2011. Moving forward, there's been many scientific studies to support infertility. I mean, in Israel, they found, this is in, I think, 2014, I believe it was. And there's a few more studies have come after that, but this is the one that really sticks out in my mind. Because this is from 2014, when we were technically only in 3G. And the reason why I'm bringing up 3G, third generation technology, is because we're now entering and we are starting to evolve into a 5th generation technology driven infrastructure. But this has happened during the third generation study on specifically from Israel, that said 30 minutes of cell phone exposure, specifically for men, has an increase over the course of 10 years, has a I would say an increase in infertility up to 80%.
In 30 minutes a day, you're saying?
30 minutes a day over 10
Wow.
years, up to 80%. Basically, sperm, I would say the sperm count, the reduction of our boys, if I can be a little bit more, candid. But yeah, like that's what happens. And that was from, again, 2014. So imagine that was during a third generation, not necessarily smartphone driven era or time, and now we're progressing into a 5G generation driven technology, society. So that's just one. There's so many. There's links to autism, right? Specifically child development, fetal development. There's a huge project out of the U.S. called the Baby Safe Project, which is spearfunded by and headed by Dr. Deborah Davis out of from the Environmental Health Trust. She used to be the former medical advisor to Bill Clinton's administration. Just so just so people can understand that these are real doctors, not like pretend doctors who are, let's just say, conditioned by their environment. She's been there, she's done it. She's a top doctor, leading doctor. And she's been a very big advocate, specifically in the US with the Environmental Health Trust, but more specifically with the Baby Safe Project. And that's because there's a direct link there with fetal development, specifically during gestation for women who are pregnant, which is a huge thing for me. I'm a parent, I have 2 kids. Over there, a lot of the research and studies go into how, pregnancy and EMFs affect, how the fetus is developed. And then, of course, thereafter, some of the I would say the associated risks with childhood development in terms of learning, specifically, again, autism, ADHD, increasing on the rise. I can't remember, and you can't quote me on this, but I do remember reading a study saying that 1 in 10, I think, American, I think this is an American study, American children will be autistic by 2025. 1 in 10. I mean,
Jeez.
I'm sure there's a lot of environmental factors and other
sure.
factors as well, genetic as well. But I mean, and I'm not just saying that this is specifically related to EMFs, but I mean, you have to wonder, right? And you have to correlate. And this is sort of what, EMFs really are. It's a environmental toxin that a lot of people are really not fully understanding or grasping the severity of it. And the reason why I'm saying that is because you have no choice. You have no decision in this,
Right.
unless you're living completely off grid. So if you're living in the city, in an urban center, obviously we use technologies. I mean, we're communicating right now. We're, doing this podcast, this interview through, wireless communications. I mean, you may be plugged in hardwired, but at the same time, it's still emitting, right? Electromagnetic fields. Same thing over here.
And it's tough, and like you're saying, it's tough to avoid that. And like to your point about 30 minutes a day, and this is, this is before 4G, 5G, LTE, all these other, Gs. This is a long time ago. And in terms of technology scope, like only 10 years ago, but in the scope of technology, it's like light years ago, because we progress so fast. And I think that's the biggest thing that, I try to educate people to think about is like, hey, it's not just that this technology is evolving, it's how fast it's evolving. And our bodies cannot keep up with this adaptation to this level of stress. And we're already exposed to so many different levels of stress, let alone environmental things. But the fact that most of us are sitting all day, we're staring at a screen all day, we're working jobs, much of us, that we don't like. And then you add in things like pollution, you add in things like electromagnetic frequencies, and that's going to be a recipe for disaster. And I think for EMFs in particular, it can be easy to dismiss them because we can't see them. And we can't necessarily, a lot of people can't feel them. I personally, if I'm driving, I feel my heart rate start to elevate. I look up, there's a 5G tower, pretty nearby. I can, very subtle, but I can become aware my nervous system starts to turn on a little bit when I'm exposed to these things. So, it's tough. And so, how do we show people that these are very much real and it's not just fear mongering, that, how do we show this to people?
Yeah. So, I mean, and getting back to some of the studies, because, one of the most recent and very heavily, I would say, credible studies that came out of the National Toxicology Program, which is a U.S. government health agency funded by the government, found in 2018 and in 2019, they released their studies that, specifically with mice, again, 30 minutes of exposure over the course of, I believe that study was 2 years, showed an increase, I think mainly in male mice, which is schwannomas, which is like a heart inflammation. And the reason why I'm bringing that up is because, there's a lot of heart inflammation sort of bouncing around now. And also glioblastoma, which is the same cancer and tumor I was talking about earlier before. This is, again, a 30-minute exposure over 2 years. These are lab mice, specifically men. Or male mice were generally affected. Women were affected as well, but not nearly to the severity of the male mice. And the reason why I'm bringing that up, to touch on everything that you were just mentioning, is that, again, we are moving at such a fast pace, and a lot of the, I would say, the caution or a need for a pause maybe should be done to really verify whether or not there is a biological and not whether there is a biological effect, but whether or not there needs to be a new set of standards for safety, for example. And the safety standards currently today that are implemented that really have give the green light to manufacturers to produce these products are very, very outdated. And by outdated, I mean they really don't factor the biological effects. In fact, most of the safety standards do not incorporate the biological effects. What really dictates and really gives the stamp of approval or the certification that a particular wireless technology product is safe is really what they call a SAR level, which is a specific absorption rate, which is really just the heating of the tissue. And that is pretty much it with regards to safety. Now, obviously, there's some safety standards there that have to be met, like specifically to the batteries and how the batteries are produced, and and obviously fire and safety with regards to that. But when it comes to EMFs specifically, the only checkbox really that a manufacturer has to currently meet is that it doesn't exceed the SAR level, which is I can't remember what it is per gram of tissue, but it's, again, we're talking very, very low. And that's really just the heating or the burning of your skin if it's in contact with one of these devices. And that takes a long time, obviously. If you're using the phone, you notice it gets quite hot, but really tissue damage and specific absorption rate, which is the SAR I was mentioning earlier, that's the only checkbox to really make or break, the safety of your particular device that you're currently using. The biological effects have not been factored, not one bit. And this is what a lot of agencies like the Environmental Health Trust have been pushing. In fact, they recently won a court hearing in DC, I believe, that is forcing the FCC specifically to revamp their safety protocols and their safety sets of standards and how these technologies are deemed safe by incorporating the biological effects.
Wow. Well, that's progress. Now it's just a hope of can we keep this progress up at the pace that technology is being rolled out. And that's a big challenge. And, we live in a world of instant gratification. And for me, when we were at the 4G and LTE level on my phone, I thought that was plenty fast enough. I'm cool with waiting half a second as opposed to instantaneous. So it's just fine balance of, yes, we want to be efficient. Yes, we want to have speed. Yes, we want to have all these things. But at what point does the benefit start to become a little murky, that it's like, is that extra half a second worth, that reduction in sperm count? Is it worth the inflammation in the heart? Is it worth, a lot of these other potential side effects that are out there? To me, I don't think so. But to some people, a lot of people aren't quite aware of the effect that these are having on it. And all they're thinking of is that speed. So, what I always try to tell people is, at the end of the day, we can do the best we can to educate people about these things. We can do the best we can to give solutions, but technology is going to keep on keeping on until there's some laws in place to stop them. So,
Right.
What do you recommend for people to reduce their exposure to EMFs and some solutions that we can utilize to help to, reduce the negative effects of them?
Yeah. So until safety standards are sort of up to speed with how I suppose technology is manufactured and used, and then of course the infrastructure that is dependent on a lot of these wireless devices. A lot of the time, yes, technology is very good, and it's super important in terms of the advancement of civilization, and obviously, making and creating. Obviously there's implications, so society implications as well. But at the end of the day, it's all about convenience, as you were touching on. But until then, until we have a new safety standards, until there is irrefutable bulletproof evidence that electromagnetic fields, radio waves, or microwave radiation is cancerous, is toxic, you have to think about how to reduce your risks or exposure. And it's kind of hard. I'll be honest with you. It's very hard because a lot of people are really dependent on these technologies or interactions, both physically and mentally, even because there's a lot of there's a lot of dependency there as well. But what you really have to factor is what I use as an acronym. And this is really just standard sort of safety procedure, if you want to call it that. A really good safety practice tip is what I call DLS, which is distance and limit and shut down. So the idea is to really distance yourself from a lot of the wireless specific frequencies. So for example, in your home, if you have a Wi-Fi router, I would suggest not put it in your bedroom. EMFs have been linked to show an increase in really brain activity, which has obviously a decrease in specific melatonin, which has an adverse effect for you when you're in the bedroom. And of course you want to sleep, and it's the quality of sleep, not the amount of hours of sleep that you get, which a lot of people forget. Getting back to my point about distancing yourself from these frequencies, is that having that in your bedroom, near your bed or by your bed. And I've seen this because it's insanity to me in some people's homes that it's right by their bed. You do not want to have a Wi-Fi router anywhere near you. Distance is your friend at all times. So you distance yourself from your Wi-Fi routers, you distance yourself from a lot of the Bluetooth gadgets, whether they're Wi-Fi boosters, extenders, for example. I'm just using the household sort of as painting the picture, demonstrate what I mean by distance. Your cell phone, for example, a lot of people aren't aware, but your cell phone has a warning label, or I should say a disclaimer. It tells you body separation, right? Keep this phone away from you. And usually it's anywhere between 5 to 8 millimeter separation. In other words, don't touch it. Manufacturer tells you they're right there. So distance yourself. Don't handle the devices you frequently use every day. Try and put them in an area where you're not physically touching them. So for example, mine's on my table right now. My laptop, I'm not touching it. I'm in front of it, but I'm not touching it. My tablets and everything else that I use, whether it's on my lap or my laptop's on my lap, I definitely, if I am going to use it, for example, on the couch, because I'm guilty, just like everybody else, I'll put like a pillow in between. I don't want this sort of radiating, on my boys, so to speak, because as I already mentioned, I am a parent of two, and so far things are good, but I would have to say a lot of it has been, because I've been distancing myself, and of course, we'll get to it, but using my technology as well. So distance here is your friend. Limit is usually tied to really just, I would say, keeping or capping yourself from overusing devices that you really have no need for. So for example, a lot of people I see walking around, and this is insanity to me too, like insanity, but we're talking earbuds, right? It's in their ear all day, like legitimately all day. I mean, like
me and my buddy call them brain grenades.
Yeah, like honestly, dude, like this is insanity. Like I see people walking, and like, don't get me wrong, I got good buddies who've been with me as far as like my journey too, and they know how how much of an advocate I am for safe use of technology and EMF exposure, and they still put it in their ear and they rock around. And like, not to say that they're on the phone all the time, right? I mean, these are guys that are just sort of, they have businesses, they run businesses, and they rely a lot on, cell phone or communication, right? But I mean, when you're done with it, when you're off the call, take it out of your ear, right? It's very simple. Remember, I just told you about the NTP, the National Toxicology Program, right? They found an increase in male, specifically mice, with 30 minutes of exposure over the course of 2 years of glioma, specifically, again, here in the temporal lobe, right? I mean, the correlation is there. It's almost, I would say, irrefutable that it can be related to cell phone use, or in this case, your AirPods or Bluetooth headsets. Again, limit here, the L is to really limit the amount of exposure you have when you are physically in contact with your devices. So and that was just a prime example of just the earpod itself, or the AirPod. But it's also when you're physically handling, like I'm guilty, I'm in my phone and I'm texting steady, or I'm answering an email, or maybe I'm just, creeping Instagram. I don't know. But, half an hour can lead to like an hour.
Right.
And even kids, like even with my kids, and I can tell you, like my daughter, she's quite, I'm not gonna say young, but she's getting older to a point where, she's now, she's 5 years old. She knows how to use a tablet, in this case, an iPad. And she is, she can be glued to that thing if unchecked for hours, like hours. So again, my recommendation, safety practice, a tip. We already covered distance. That's the D. L is limit. So limit the amount of exposure or usage of these devices. Obviously, that helps when it comes to protecting your body from these negative effects. And then the third is really shut down, right? Or turn off. And when you turn off your devices, really gives you a nice break period to just sort of get in tune with yourself, which is always a good thing, because you often find that, you're going, a mile a minute, and it's hard to sort of just ground yourself a little. So definitely by turning off your devices, A, you're more present. And then B, you also are now putting yourself in a position where your body can now just relax and you can get into that state, specifically at the end of the day, where you now need to recoup, re-energize, and of course have a great night's sleep. So DLS, distance, limit, shut down.
Love it, man. I love how you laid that out, and that makes it easy to remember too. And because, a lot of times when I'm suggesting things to people, it's like you said, keep your phone off you as much as you can, especially guys, get it out of your pockets, because, our pockets are deep and right by, like you said, our little boys. So keep it out of the pockets. I think that's the biggest thing. My phone's over here. I tell people, unplug your freaking Wi-Fi when you're not using it, especially at night. Like, make that part of your evening routine. That's one of my number one things when working with clients. Like, when you go to bed, make part of your evening routine to unplug your Wi-Fi, and then don't plug it back in until you need to use it. Because a lot of times, like, especially with our phones now, if you're going to check something quick, most of us have some sort of data. If you're checking something real quick, you don't need to plug in the Wi-Fi and have that blasting. Like, check it real quick, put it away. And then, like you said, shutting things down. And I'm a big fan of unplugging things when I'm not using, because one, it creates that barrier to using them quite a bit harder, because I got to plug it back in, I got to turn it back on. But it's also, our circuits are adding a little bit of those frequencies out there too. So I tell people, if you can shut down your whole circuit board to part of your house at night, that's a good move too. So it's a lot of little things, but like we're saying, this is stimulating that fight or flight response, that sympathetic nervous system.
Correct.
And most of us are chronically in that already.
Yes, that's right. I mean, we're highly stressed. Our bodies are exposed, and exactly like you said, and we're in that state, that fight or flight mode, and that contributes. And again, we can go on and on, like literally, and then that can contribute to an overall decline in your optimization and in your health and your wellness, because there's a lot of autoimmune diseases. And I'm not going to get into it all, but there's many that you can say don't. And I'm, to be honest with you, I'm actually one of them that have triggered for no genetic reason. Is just some odd anomaly, right? That has triggered this, a lot of these AI type of illnesses that people are afflicted with, and it's only going up. It's not going away, and there's really no answer for this other than maybe just start to look at your health and do a real sort of I would say deep dive into yourself and see what are the contributing factors and how can I better myself. And again, I'm no different. I am one of these people, but I've also done my best to mitigate and live with a lot of these toxins, and of course eliminate them as best as I can, or live with them in a more responsible manner. And this is what we're just talking about: distance, limit, shut down. The other one I forgot, which is I'm pretty sure you're probably doing right now. You got to hardwire everything if you possibly can. That's a great way to minimize your wireless exposure. However, there is still what I just mentioned to you before earlier, which is the low frequencies, the LFs, that are still buzzing around you, that your body's still exposed to, just on a very low level, which is not necessarily that it's not safe. It's a lot, I would say, safer than wireless exposure.
100%. And like you're saying, you got the microphone is not wireless, the mouse is not wireless, and a lot of these things, again, I get it, it's convenient, but at the end of the day, having a few cords lying around isn't going to hurt you either, and you can make it look nice. So those are some things we can do. Make it simple that way. Old-fashioned headphones, simple things. Plants is a big thing, kind of grounding, having more of those native frequencies in the room, making sure we're hydrated. Again, if we're putting stress in the body, there's so many different health things that we can get into. And that's a big thing when I'm talking to people about holistic health. The reason it's
Correct.
called holistic is because everything is
Exactly.
working together. It's a whole picture. So
Yeah.
electromagnetic frequencies, EMFs, are a piece of holistic health because it is affecting our body at a cellular level. It's causing stress. And like anybody who's listened to this podcast before knows that stress and sleep, I think, are two of the biggest challenges that we face as modern Americans today. And, just people in established country. I know you're in Canada, so you fit that, that same category. Anybody that's in the go world is affected by stress and sleep. And electromagnetic frequencies are causing stress in the body and disrupting sleep. So, like I said, we can do all these things: DLS, adding plants, getting outside, getting more connected with nature, all great. But I want to talk about something that, obviously you are very knowledgeable about, and I was introduced to about 3 or so years ago, and that's the company you represent, which is Aries Tech. And when I first heard my mentor, Paul Chek, speaking about it, it almost sounded too good to be true. And I'm going to be honest, I was a little skeptical because I was like, can we really mitigate EMS using more technology? So I was a little skeptical. Since then, obviously, I've come around because I am a big fan of the products and I've used them myself and have had some great results. Like I was saying earlier, when I drive by 5G towers, when I got your latest model with a Life Tune, that nervous system response is definitely reduced. Sometimes it can take me until I get a little bit closer to it to realize that something's going on. So that there's a lot of little noticeable things like that. Stress levels go down. But love to just kind of have you outline, what is Aries Tech, first of all? Why did this company come into existence and how do the products work? I know it's a very loaded question, so dive on
Yeah.
in.
So yeah, I mean, I'll take it from the top. Yeah, I mean, Aries Technologies and really the products and the technology that was developed. I'll give you a quick history lesson just on this because, it started really as a military application. And by military application, I mean back in the early, I would say, early 90s, late 80s. The radar defense systems, obviously radar, which is a form of electromagnetic field, different on the spectrum, but more or less the same in terms of radio frequencies. The personnel who were manning these stations, who were part of the team that were in these towers, were increasingly being exposed, obviously, to radar frequencies. Again, same thing as electromagnetic fields or frequencies. And they noticed that I would say the personnel were developing both short and long-term health related issues. Some of them started developing leukemia and blood disorders, which we were just talking about. Has a DNA cellular damage. Others were extremely what they call brain and body fatigued. So they weren't as sharp. They weren't thinking clearly. A lot of them were finding themselves very sleepy and very lethargic. So the way it worked out is that our original founder, Igor Surov, had an agency, a research agency that was tendered by the government, and by this government, I mean, it was by the Russian government, because our technology actually has Russian origins. And the application and development of that technology was very specific. Is that one, the technology or the solution at this point, because there was no technology, has to allow us to still use our defense system, our radar defense system, and then B, it needs to have a positive effect on the personnel, where our people are not exposed to all of these toxins that are contributing to long and short-term health related issues. So that was the main objective. So this agency was actually started researching and developing this technology, and I'm giving you sort of the Cole's notes because there's a lot more to it. But for time purposes, I'm going to keep it really short. And what they developed and what they found was that they were able to diffract, if you want to use the word, and remodulate what they call a chaotic field. And this is, and touching on your sort of your 2B, 2C question there, how does it work? The way it works is that our technology uses a passive microprocessor. The passive microprocessor is then literally transforming the chaotic field into coherent field through what we call circular diffraction lattice. Now, this was developed over the course of 25 years or so, which, by the way, with over $20 million invested as well. These particular grooves, these etched grooves that are 0.002 nanometers thick. So in other words, take one of your hair follicles, for example, cut that in half. That's how fine, that's how small the grooves are etched into the passive microprocessor itself, which creates this matrix and creates this polarization in terms of an actual counter field. And I'm keeping it very simple so a lot of people can understand. If you want to knock yourself out, go on our site and you can really look at all the scientific jargon, if I call it. It's a mouthful, and it's sometimes hard to understand. So I'm giving you, the simplest form. And what we were able to accomplish is that not only were we able to modulate and recreate a counter field, a coherent field that now your body is now attuned to or resonating with, is that now, in this case, getting back to the origin story, that the air defense system, the radar system, is now still able to communicate and still able to function as normal. And in this modern day of age, we're still able to stay connected with our technology devices. So the origins of this technology was originally for use as a military application. It was specifically tendered and designed to solve this problem. Moving forward with the evolution of this technology, getting back to 2011, like I mentioned, it was only then Dmitry Surov, who is Igor's son, who is the original founder, decided, this is something we need to look into. And I think there's a way that we can help a lot of people really mitigate their exposure to EMFs. This is around 2012, 2013. And that's when the idea of the technology got commercialized into a product. This product was originally called the Aries Shield. That Aries Shield is what we call now today the LifeTune device. So it really started from that one particular product, and again in 2012. And that's more or less the sort of crash history lesson about our company and how it was really the technology was developed, what sort of came to be with regards to American Aries. Today, I happen to be one of the founding members as well, because we are now publicly traded. We have gone through you name it when it comes to the due diligence process. Anyone who knows how to become a publicly traded company, specifically an IPO, which is very, very clean in terms of the actual route to listing. It's extremely rigorous. The due diligence process, our science had to not only meet the expectations, but it had to cross X amount of check boxes, which had to be peer reviewed, which is what we ended up doing. So not only are we, do we have credible science, third-party validation and data, clinical trials as well, but we also have peer reviewed and we're publicly traded. Again, these are some of the accomplishments that we have that really separates us in terms of our technology, our company, and who we are specific to the EMF protection market.
Love it, man. Yeah, thanks for outlining that. And I actually didn't know it was part of the, the government before. That's kind of the origins. That's a cool little fun fact I just learned. And, just to, like you said, I definitely recommend people go to the site, and I will put that link in the show notes here to check that out. Because there's a lot of cool stuff on there. And like you said, you can nerd out, and some of the stuff is definitely going over my head, but there's a lot of stuff that put a lot of these pieces together. Because I think sometimes when we learn about something new, again, especially something that isn't tangible in the sense that we can't see it and feel it necessarily. Like I think that a lot of times if we're so eyesight dominant as a human species that if we can't see it, a lot of times we don't believe it. So when we can actually look at the scientific studies behind this, like you said, over $20 million worth of funding into studies, that's no shortage of funding. So and the way I look at it is the most simplistic view of how these technologies work is basically we're taking EMFs, which are incoherent waves, we're transforming them through these technologies and making them more coherent for the body to utilize. Is that correct?
Yeah, I mean, I can really just sort of touch on it again in a more sort of simplistic way. The way I use it and the way I really explain most of and I did explain it to you, but I was touching on, sort of how it was developed and, you know, its true origin. But the way our technology works is very simple. We have two working components. One is the passive microprocessor. Passive microprocessor, for example, is similar to the microprocessors that or passive microprocessors that are used in your Visa debit tap. In other words, it communicates with any external or surrounding electromagnetic field. In this case, your Visa tap would communicate with the near field terminal that exchanges that information or that particular data. The only difference here is that our technology, we're not exchanging really any data. What we're doing is digitally modifying the coherent field through what I called and what I mentioned earlier, which is this circular diffraction lattice. That is the matrix that is composed within the actual microprocessor itself. That process is a nano etching process, which makes our technology a nano-based product. And that creates the matrix that transforms and really modulates and creates that coherent field that matches your own bioresonance. So in other words, we're taking a chaotic field, matching it to your own bioelectromagnetic field, and modulating it, and by creating a stabilized field that is now natural, or I would say is body acceptable, what we call biologically compatible. So in other words, now your body is now accepting the influence that would once be negative as actually biologically compatible.
Love it, man. Yeah, and if everybody listening, like I said, I definitely recommend checking out the studies because it is cool. It's cool. So, or if you're sold on this here, you don't need to look at it anymore. Definitely check it out. I've been using the products here for just about, like I said, just under 3 years now, and I've definitely noticed a shift in my nervous system. My sleep is pretty good. Like I said, when I'm driving, I got them everywhere. I got one in my car, my phone, my computer, my keychain. Like, I just think it's better right by the Wi-Fi router, right by my bedside. Like, it's better to have it than not, is the way I look at it. And if we're going to be exposed to more and more frequencies, we can do all these cool things. And I always tell people, hey, finances are tough for some people. Start with what's free. Start by doing the DLS. But if you really want to take it to the next level, you really want to make sure that you're protected, the Aries Tech is a great, great option. So, for you listening right now, if you go to Aries Tech, and I will put the link in the description box here, they have given me a discount code I can share with my lovely listeners here. So that is the code Whole Health, WHOLE Health, all one word, and that'll save you 10% on every order that you place. And that goes on top of any sort of promotions that got going on too. So check out some promotions, and that is a great way to save some money. Get some great technology that's going to protect you, especially if you're a guy. Got to protect those fun friends we got down there.
Got to get the boys. Yeah.
Gotta get the boys.
Yeah.
Well,
That's
Kris,
funny.
I
Yeah.
appreciate your time, man. I'd love to just kind of hear, in the closing moments here, any final thoughts and what the vision is for Aries Tech moving forward.
Yeah. So honestly, it's a tricky battle that we're in because we know that we have a great technology. We know we have a great solution. We know it works. Yourself, you're electromagnetic sensitive or hypersensitive. I would say 80% of our customers are EHS. They suffer from EHS. They will stand by our technology because it has either helped eliminate or reduce their exposure and these symptoms that they live with day to day. This is a real issue, a real health concern, more taken seriously, I would say, in Europe, not so much taken seriously here in North America, unfortunately. And just to, sort of bring it all together, EHS in a lot of, I would say, European countries are now being diagnosed as a disability, which is no different than some of the disabilities that we have here, both physical and mental. So just to put it, in perspective, we are so far behind here. And getting back to what, our technology does and how it helps our customers, we know that, again, we have a very big fight, if you want to call it that, a very, very steep hill to climb, because we know that a lot of, the technologies that, we're currently using, but also the amount of data and the I would say the misinformation that is spread usually among, this particular topic and through the scientific and medical communities is that, there is no safe report. In fact, you can even go and Google it if you really want to. There is no one company, not one doctor, not one scientist that says, cell phone exposure or electromagnetic fields are completely safe, completely safe. In fact, they won't even make a decision. They'll just say that it's not harmful, but they don't say that it's not safe. So that is definitely something I want your audience to understand, and really, if there's going to be, some cause for sort of debate or even just, provoke some thought, is that we know that there is a health issue. We just don't have the final answer yet, and we're sort of figuring that out. And what this, a lot of people have, specifically in my community, and by my community I mean, like, the EHS and really, anyone who's an EMF advocate, we are living through what, is what they call the guinea pig sort of, era, where we don't know what to expect from all of this exposure, and really is what you call electromagnetic pollution. So there is so many issues that health issues I'm talking about that are going to afflict us in the future that we just have no idea how impactful it's going to be. And just, even just to throw out a figure here, by next year, 2022, there is going to be literally 3 times the amount of wireless devices than there are human population. So that just goes to show you, we are in it, right? Like, we're in it, we're living with it. So you need to do your best. You need to, yes, of course, safety practices and tips. DLS is definitely one of them. Technology products like ours, if you don't like ours, there's others that maybe fit, your sort of, I guess, prerequisite. But I can tell you, with our technology, and again, what I just mentioned to you, everything that we have done, all the accomplishments we have made, all the advancements we have made, and not only that, but we're continuing to advance. We're still investing in research and development. We are still, excuse me, coming out with new products. Myself being part of the founding team, we are, really committed to seeing an era where we can introduce these cleaner, safer, healthier, biologically compatible technologies that now can, we can coexist symbiotically with, the advancements of, obviously, technology, but obviously in a very healthy, responsible, and, humanitarian way that, we can continue to live health, very health conscious and prosperity, right? This is what we want. And this is sort of the idea that this is what we want to move towards, is creating that future, right? Creating that future where there is biologically compatible technology, creating that future where we have a clean society. Not only is it affecting humans, and that's another thing I forgot, right? It's all beings, biological beings. Like, I use the acronym B because it's biological, it's ecological, and environmental, right? Electromagnetic fields have a huge impact on everything here that we live with, including all of the tiny insects. For bees, for example, like you were talking about, like the bats, these are pollinators. Without these pollinators, a lot of the plant life we have today, in fact, everything, won't exist, because it's now messing with their navigation systems, right? It's now messing with how they interact with one another. There's actually society issues in bees. In fact, we're actually doing studies with how bees interact with one another and how they're influenced by these negative effects of electromagnetic fields, both from a navigational standpoint and how they pollinate and where they choose to pollinate, to how they actually live with the queen bee and procreate. There's even that issue there, and that's just the bee colony. So imagine you eliminate these pollinators. That's just one example. And then, of course, just all the living animals. And it's funny because I came across, early in my days, when I got first involved when I first got involved with this technology and was selling this technology, I had a very interesting conversation with a cattle producer. Now you're probably saying, what the hell does a cattle producer have to do with EMFs? Well, I mean, mass cattle production, and really in the agriculture business, specifically when it comes to mass production of beef, they use a lot of technology advancements, specifically to help get the best yield on their product, in this case, cattle, but also reduce their costs. They're very cost efficient with how much does one cow eat? How much does a calf need? How much water do we need, right? They literally calculate all this. A lot of them are using a lot of Bluetooth types of technologies to specifically measure and really see how profitable, let's just say, they can possibly be. Now, I didn't know this, but 4 or 5 years ago, when I had this conversation with a major Irish and Brazilian cattle farm producer, they mentioned to me that about 20% of their livestock suffers from what they call lame cow disease. Now, you can look this up if you want. And it's not, I'm not going to say it's 100% associated with EMFs, but and this is their words, since they've been using these Bluetooth type of collars, communications with a tower or with some type of cell mast in the actual farm itself, they said they've noticed an increase up to 20% of lame cow disease afflicts their cattle, their livestock. So imagine now you have 20%, and this is why I'm going back with the biological, ecological, and environmental. These are all the impacts that we have. So imagine now the quality of beef that you're buying, for example, that you eat on, that you rely. And maybe for this audience, maybe there's a lot of vegans out there and vegetarians. But for those who are, still eating meat, the quality of meat you're getting now is actually tainted. It's not as natural as it should be, or maybe that it could be, or maybe that you bought it at, because there's a lot of people saying, farm to table. Yeah, that's great. None of the chemicals, the pesticides, the genetically modified, meat. So you think, but maybe they're using these type of Bluetooth technologies that are actually, contributing to the decline in not only the cow's health, but obviously the quality of meat. There's just so much really to go over. The quality of water, how water is restructured, and really, the molecules, even with the water. I mean, a lot of people are big on water and purification these days, obviously. Exactly. Yeah. So, I mean, our technology has the ability to restructure the water molecules, which is obviously going in your body. And not only that, we're restructuring the way your body now responds to electromagnetic fields. So now the water that's in your body is now being restructured. So there's a lot of things you can do, but really, to bring home everything, we are focused on the future, and we're focused on being that pioneer, being that leader to get into these areas, whether it's agriculture, whether it's, biotech. And by biotech, I mean like literally like the technologies that people use for themselves, on themselves. We are looking to get into everything you can think of. And that's really just to help, again, give back to humanity, which is why I'm very mission driven. I want to live in an era where my kids can now freely enjoy these technologies without having the negative impacts or the fear or the disaster, depending on how things go, and really the outlook of these health risks. And that's my thing, and that's my shtick, if you want to call it that, is really just to give back, create a society where we have these technologies. We are engaged with these technologies, but we're doing it in a healthier, cleaner, safer, biologically compatible manner, and future generations can benefit from.
Brilliant, man. Well, I'm looking forward to the future with you, because this is when we got people like you doing the work that you're doing, it gives me a lot of hope, because sometimes it can seem like a lot of bad shit's happening. But when we got some people like you working on the other side of history and trying to make it better, definitely gives me hope. So, Kris, I appreciate you being here, man. Everybody listening, thank you for listening, and we'll talk to you very soon.
Awesome. Thanks, Rob. Appreciate it.
Thanks so much for listening to this episode of the podcast. I hope you enjoyed this conversation I had with Kris. And the next step for you is to go to ariestech.com, check out what they got there, and use the discount code WHOLEHEALTH to save yourself 10% off your every single order. You can also poke around and see a lot of the great research they've got going on there, because like we mentioned, they put over $20 million into research for these products. So check it out. Follow along with what they're doing. If you haven't already subscribed to this podcast, subscribe to my YouTube channel. Whole Health Connections. I would really appreciate that support. That helps me to continue to get these messages out there of these incredible people who are sharing a message that is ultimately changing the world. Technology is not stopping anytime soon, like we mentioned, but if we can learn to balance ourselves within the technology and live more harmoniously within it, we're going to see some benefits. So, like we had mentioned, this is part of the greater holistic approach. Everything is connected. It's all connected. So, when we benefit one part of our lives, reducing EMFs, we're improving our sleep, we're improving our stress, reducing inflammation, a lot of these other things that we talked about. So, once again, head over to ariestech.com, use the discount code WHOLEHEALTH, or check on the show notes for that link. Thanks so much for listening. Have an epic day, and we'll see you soon.